Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston. Each episode features conversations about emerging trends and news that affect the death care industry. We talk to people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. This week, I'm speaking with Jennifer Lares about her training, education, and consulting business, Mortuary Mary Poppins. We talk mostly about the importance of being able to get people to continue education and how she kind of takes some of the pressure off by coming to the funeral home or funeral business that needs her help. But that's really just the beginning of it. This is actually kind of a wide-ranging conversation, and I think you're going to get a huge kick out of it. Before we get started, just a gentle reminder, please subscribe wherever you're listening now, or follow if you're on Apple, and reach out to us if you have any questions, suggestions, problems. You can get to us in the show notes. You can email me directly at arusso@kbpublications.com. You can also find me socially on LinkedIn, and you can find Funeral Service Insider, the Facebook group, on LinkedIn as well, or you can follow us on Facebook, FSI. We post everything there. I want to let you know that the annual Kates-Boylston Compensation Survey is out. If you go to katesboylston.com or follow the link in the show notes, you can contribute to this survey, which gives probably one of the best pictures of what people are being paid in funeral service, but also what the benefit structures are and whether and to what degree overtime is going to factor in this year. We use your answers to compile the annual Kates-Boylston Compensation Survey report, and I would really like it if you guys jumped on and told me what you do and how compensation affects the way that you do your job. And as always, please stay on after for the postmortem. This week, I'm going to talk a little bit about a funeral comic series. I've already done a story on it, but the series has come to a completion, and I want to give it a quick shout out. But for now, let's get into this conversation with Jennifer. So there is this, the poll line for you is Mortuary Mary Poppins, which is not only clever wordplay, but also kind of gets at, your unique take on a side way of approaching, funeral service. So can you tell me how you decided that you wanted to be a Mortuary Mary Poppins and how you made that happen?
Sure. So oftentimes, if you get the opportunity to attend a training event, whether it's a conference or a technical seminar, right? If you're fortunate, you get to go and have these experiences where you're learning new techniques, you get to utilize new supplies maybe you're not familiar with, and it's very exciting. And then you turn around and you go back to where you work, and you may or may not have those supplies. You may or may not be able to explain to your peers or your management about the value of that training, and it makes it kind of complicated. And then from a leadership perspective, it makes it difficult because you have to figure out if you can send someone, who you're going to send, and it upsets, operations sometimes. So I like the idea of bringing the training to the people. And with Mary Poppins, the character, she floats in, she's got a bag full of all these unique items she pulls out. She works a little magic, right, where she's needed. And then when she's done, she just floats away, right? And she sits on her cloud, she sees where somebody needs help, and poof, she shows up, helps them out, everybody's happy and dancing around, then she leaves. So in the way that I utilize it, no one dances around necessarily, but I do have a bag of different little supplies and things, and I bring the training to the locations. And so I like to empower people to recognize what they're capable of doing and achieving with either supplies and materials and knowledge they have themselves there physically, or I can make recommendations of things they need. But the idea is, instead of, trying to bring the people to you, which also involves overhead and all these other things, I was like, why not just go to the people and also tailor your training to what they specifically need? Who is the clientele they're serving? What are their unique challenges? Because you have some that are very generalized to funeral service, but then you have some that are going to be more location specific. And this is whether it's corporate, family owned, whatever it might be, right? So if you can bring either the funeral directing or the embalming or the business knowledge to them, demonstrate and show them how to use it, and then you float off, then you've done good for the location, as well as you're able to teach and train multiple people within that location and not upset, the day-to-day operation. And so that was the idea behind the Mary Poppins reference. Was I'm just going to float in there, and I'm not going to come in there like some type of, mortuary deity that knows everything, but I'm going to show you the things that I have had the privilege of learning through my experiences, through mentors, through education, all these things that I've invested in. Let me bring it over here to you so that you can also benefit from it in a way that's really applicable to you. And then I'm available to them after I leave. And it works out to where they have a really empowering experience, and it's very transparent to leadership. And that was really the whole idea, was to come in, swoop in, do my thing. And then when my work is done, I leave. So that was the thinking behind
How
it.
did you discover the need? I mean, this is something that people need because you're doing it, but how did you know that it was something worth doing or something that people would respond to?
Well, I mean, when you're in that position, right, where you see a training opportunity, that your average person, right, they go to their leadership, they're like, oh, I really want to go attend this event. And then it becomes, well, let's, look at the budget. Let's look at, if we're able to send you, are we going to be short staffed? And what happens is sometimes the burden of training and learning, even if you are motivated and ambitious as an individual, you have these constraints that are external to you as a person, but they're more just as organizational limitations. And so what happens is it becomes more challenging. And then it becomes, okay, well, you've already gone to a training this year, so you don't get to go to another one. We're going to send this guy over here. And if you're hungry to learn, it can be very disheartening. And I know this from my own experiences, being a film director and embalmer. I wanted to learn about airbrush, for example, for a million years, because back in the dark ages when I got out of mortuary school, it wasn't so much of an actively taught skill or tool being utilized. And so that was always on my little checklist of, I'm going to learn how to do airbrush cosmetics someday. And then I later would find a training. I would invest some of my own money and pursue this training and buy my own equipment, and just kind of made it happen. But it's like, what if you don't have that capability? It's almost like your learning is stunted. And that doesn't just stunt the individual, it stunts the organization, right? Because it's like, okay, and I'm sure there are embalmers out there, or even funeral directors, that they'll learn something and you'll immediately think back to a case where you're like, God, I wish I'd known how to do that then.
Right.
God, I wish I had realized that all I had to do was this or this. And you immediately jump back to a case or to a family you've served. And it's like, if you can close that gap and do it in a way that's cost effective, because again, I don't have a location with overhead. I don't have anatomical donation cases I have access to, things like that. So I don't have the expenses necessarily. I'm just a small female veteran-owned little business doing my thing over here. I think that people want to grow and learn. I think a lot of them do. Not all of them do. Some are very comfortable where they're at, but I think that's also going to be where the sustainability and the differentiation in our field is going to come from, because the people who are very comfortable and in their knowledge and not really seeking to kind of keep up, they're going to eventually find that they're left behind a little bit. So I wanted to be able to take away that burden or that barrier to learning. And I saw it being on that, side of, I really want to go do this training. But, when I went to the European School of Embalming Skills, that was a really special training event. They had it one time a year. Very small group of people were able to get in there. And I paid for that myself, and I did what I needed to on my own. I didn't have support from an employer because I saw the value of that, and I knew it was going to help me in caring for other people. But not everyone has that ability to do that. It took budgeting and careful thought for me and my family to do that. But I wanted to be able to make it easier for people who want to be better to be able to do that.
So many questions. So let's start with continuing education. Can you offer credits like where you live? Is that something, since you're a teacher, that you can do, or is this knowledge that you get but you don't get to check off the continuing education box?
Well, I'm actually an approved CE provider with the Academy of Professional Funeral Service Practitioners. Mm-hmm. And so that covers specific states. And typically I'll give them the option. It's like, if you want me to come and get CE approvals beyond like what the academy provides, it may cost you extra, but I'll do that. I'll submit what I need to submit. Or if you're comfortable, you're going to get a certificate either way. It's just a matter of how that certificate's really utilized. But I am an academy provider at a minimum. So I do have that provision. And then what I do is I create some customized training that I then get approved. Some of it's general and can be, applied in other places, but then some of it's going to be a little more customized. And so I'm able to, in speaking to the leadership, and them sharing their challenges, or in talking to the, what do you want your people to know when I leave there? What do you want to see different? I'm able to then craft a training program. And as an educator with experience in, tailored content for course design and adult learners, I'm able to come up with ways to make it engaging, interactive. And so they get to learn by seeing, learn by doing. And I do get that approval. It's really up to the location, but I do have the capabilities of CE approvals on the material.
Beyond the CE approvals, what's interesting to me is this notion of bringing embalming extra classes to the funeral home, because if you have, let's say, I don't know, 6 directors, it's really hard to justify the cost of sending 6 directors to learn more about embalming when, embalming is not really, you're not going to have all 6 people doing embalmings every day, all week. Right. Mm-hmm. As embalming kind of falls off, it becomes more specialized. And that's a weird thing that I don't know how much discussion you have with other professional body preparation types about this kind of weird difference where it's a really kind of a cream rising to the top with fewer opportunities. It's harder to get better through practice. And so this kind of learning, I think, becomes more important. Am I close?
Yes, you are. And what's nice too is like some of the content I create, like it is for the whole staff. I have a presentation and a program I created called Sweat the Small Stuff. And it's all about not only focusing on details because you're creating a client experience, but I have everyone that works in there that the management will let attend come in there. And by the time you leave, you recognize the value you bring as an individual in that organization, regardless of your title. And it also helps connect dots. So if I'm a funeral director in the front of the house, I'm an embalmer in the back of the house, it really helps remind them of that fluidity between the two in order to achieve the ultimate care for that family. And I think as embalming itself, even if the percentage of cases being embalmed decreases, you're still going to have potentially ID views or families that want to see their loved one. And that's where you can start talking about things like how to have those conversations or how to present, even if they're unembalmed, in a way that is going to be pleasant for the family to have that goodbye moment. I have training specific for directors, how to have difficult conversations with families, Like I remember when I was an intern, that feeling when you would come to the end of the arrangement conference and it was time to give them the statement of goods and services, right? And you're looking at it from like, your wallet and you're like, oh my God, I have to give them this bill for $11,000 and I feel bad about it, right? And I'm not sure how to necessarily like say it with confidence. And so some of it's even training on things like that, so some of it is how to take good care of people, because I think at the end of the day, especially with all the trends and the things that we're seeing, what's important to people now is different than what it was maybe 20 years ago. And as they become more independent or more, eco-friendly in their decisions, you've got to not only be the expert in knowledge, but you've got to really provide something different for them. Even if it's, when you get a shopper call, are you taking a moment to just extend condolences that they're even having to make that call? Are you asking for their name when you talk to them? Are we making things personal, even on subtle levels? Because the service piece is what's going to make you separate from your competitors. And that's really where the value lies, more so than the merchandise. And so it's being able to polish those skills as well, whether it's in how you present the decedents or how you present service options. All those things are tied together. And so it's important to be able to connect those dots sometimes for people.
I spoke with someone, and I don't remember who, so I'm sorry if it was someone who's listening and I'm misquoting you a little bit. They gave me the impression, their opinion was that the better you are at embalming, the better you are at selling embalming in the conference room. Like the more you understand how much good you personally can do, the easier it is to let a family know, to convey that interest to a family, that confidence to a family. And as you were talking about as you were talking about, justifying the cost of a funeral in general, that was the first thing that came to my mind. This person was I wish I could remember who it was, but they were very passionate about the fact that if you're an excellent embalmer, you're going to do a better job at selling a family on why embalming will improve their experience than if you're not. And I don't know if that was just a hair of arrogance or if that was something that you experienced. I don't know if you have any kind of insight that way.
I think it's about understanding too, because I mean, it's like anything else. Let's say that you work in a restaurant and your brother's the cook back there, right? And you're at your table taking an order, and the client at the table asks you to make a recommendation of what dish, or they point out a dish and say, "Oh, is this any good?" And your brother can't cook this dish to save his life. Right. So you're not going to confidently say, "Oh yeah, you should definitely order that. That's great." No, you're not, if you don't believe it yourself, you're not going to be able to convey that. So even if you're not an embalmer at all, if you're seeing the cases or the loved ones come out and look a certain way as a director, and you're either displeased yourself personally with how they look, or you don't know enough about the process, then you're not going to be able to speak with confidence. So even if you take the individual, because the ego lives in the embalmer. We know this, right? I mean, let's just be honest. There is a little bit of ego in there, and there's a little sensitivity in there, which is another nice thing about my training. I'm gentle, and I'm not going to come in there and try and tell you I know everything. We're going to collaborate, and this is going to be good stuff, right? But a lot of it sometimes is especially think about states where you can just be a director and not necessarily licensed as an embalmer. So you're skipping some sciences. You're not privy to the chemistry. You're not understanding why the embalmer needs, some additional information or why they're asking you certain questions. So some of it could be a lack of knowledge. And then some of it, if your firm is legitimately putting out loved ones that your own staff is not feeling good about how they look, they're not going to, in good conscience, make those suggestions. And people can tell. People can tell if you're making a suggestion and you wholeheartedly believe in it. And they can tell when you don't. And that also comes through transparently when you're presenting the bill to them, right? Because if you feel confident that you are giving them the best possible services and things, you're going to feel more comfortable when you present your charges versus, my brother cannot cook this goulash that you ordered. I'm going to hand you this ticket and run away real fast before you, have a minute to make eye contact with me. So it's very similar in that capacity, I think. And another thing too is the definition of a good embalmer. Whose criteria when we look at that? Like you may say, I'm a good embalmer, I'm an expert embalmer, but no one's going to say, I'm really not a good embalmer. Nobody's going to tell you that, probably, right? I mean, you would assume. I've yet to find someone who says, I'm not a good embalmer. And it's okay because, we're not all born with, and I say this with like a trocar in one hand, thankfully, and aneurysm hook in the other hand. We all have to learn these things. But it's about wanting to do better and wanting to be better and being honest in what you can and can't do, really, at the end of the day. But I think a lot of it's just about knowledge and confidence
and strengths and weaknesses. If you know that you have a colleague who's going to be able to do a better job than you, it might make more sense to say, "Hey, colleague, do a better job than me."
Or brainstorm. You can do that. I did that a lot, when I was in Germany. Me and one of my colleagues, we've both been licensed for 20 plus years, but sometimes we would assess a case together. And I'd be like, "Oh, what do you think about this? I'm thinking about doing this." And he'd be like, "Well, I don't know. What about trying this?" And it wasn't that we didn't know what to do. We were just brainstorming different ideas on how to approach it. Because we knew what we were going to be doing more or less, but it was, what about this over here? Or why don't we try to do this over here? And we kind of approached the cases in those situations where it wasn't, I know everything and I'm not going to solicit input. Because another thing too is when you have the abilities like I did in Germany, I got to work with directors that were of different ethnicities, that had different experiences in the clientele that they cared for. So if I had someone that was African American or a minority that maybe I had less experience caring for, and I had, certain questions or wanted input because the ways might be slightly different, I'm going to ask those questions and vice versa. So even the way cosmetics were applied, I learned there were some slight differences. So it's being receptive to those things and realizing that you can be good at what you do, but there's always room for improvement, and there's always a new technique or way of doing something that can be really beneficial, or it just proves that what you're already doing maybe is the most advantageous.
Hey folks, I want to take a second to talk to you about Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. We are ending 2024 with a big subscription push because we're really proud of the work we're doing and we want more of you to be able to see it. So if you're enjoying this podcast, if you're a podcast listener, I promise you're going to enjoy Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. So as we bring 2024 to a close, we are offering Funeral Service Insider for $99 for the year. That is $246 off the regular cover price. What makes Funeral Service Insider such a premium product is the fact that we do independent, originally reported news every week. We're out there looking for things that you won't hear about elsewhere, or you're unlikely to hear about elsewhere. And if it's something that's going on in the news, we try to find a different angle on it altogether. Every week, we work to make sure that we're delivering what you're paying a premium for. Plus, to round out your reading for the month, you can subscribe to American Funeral Director, the premier magazine of the industry, for just $12. That is $1 an issue. Same thing with American Cemetery and Cremation, which is undergoing a renaissance and is worth reading cover to cover every month for $12 per month. That's $1 an issue. For the two premium magazines, it is $99, which is like a little less than $2 an issue for Funeral Service Insider. We at Kates-Boylston work every day to make each publication worth your time and effort, and we appreciate the support that you already give us. So once again, visit katesboylston.com/holiday or go to the show notes where you can find a link and subscribe to any or all of our funeral industry publications. All right, let's get back into it. It's funny, I'm going to get a little self-referential here. I don't remember when the editorial came out, but I had just written about expertise and kind of like how expertise works from my perspective, watching how it goes in funeral service. And for me, expertise is the ability to kind of know how much more there is to learn. Like, you know, it's the expert is going to be a little bit more humble than the almost expert because they know that there are so many subtle things that they can do to make these little improvements. And when you were speaking about being in Germany, that was what came to my mind, this idea of, okay, we both know we can make it really good, but what can we do to approach perfection? And that's kind of the difference between, I guess, a good expert and a bad expert.
Yes, and it's interesting because I actually posed a question on a discussion board on social media. It was a little while back, and I was just picking brains. I was curious. And I was like, in your opinion, what is the difference between confidence and arrogance? And one of the people put, confidence is quiet and arrogance is loud. And you'll see that when you meet certain people. Like I met Robert Mayer last week. I mean, he's written textbooks, right? I mean, the Bob Mayer, and he was the most humble, personable guy. He didn't walk around like he created, the embalming machine or anything like that. He was just very approachable and just a regular person. And it's almost like the people that know that they're at a certain point, they're comfortable enough with it that they don't feel like they have to run around and tell you. And I think that arrogance and confidence line, it was really interesting. And then as women, we have to be a little more careful in that because of how things can be perceived, because there is a little bit of a gender lens sometimes with that as well. But yeah, so I like what you say about the whole expertise thing. And I think expertise, it's recognizing that you can potentially do more or do something different.
So you brought it up, so I'm gonna continue along. There is this, and it's not going to get less weird, I don't think, in the next 5 years. Social media oddity, I guess, where there are experts like yourself who have these social media presences, and there's a tension between what should you be doing on social media and what shouldn't you, and who should you listen to and who you shouldn't. Especially we've been writing, we've been doing stories about students, and they're like, students go on social media and they see this, that, and the other thing, and they get the wrong impression. And also, these are words were spoken from people like yourself who have successful social media presences. So can you talk a little bit about like the responsibility of running a social media account that is incredibly popular, but also incredibly specific?
I think that you have to be mindful too about like what is your purpose, or who are you talking to, right? Because you may be
Mm,
talking, a lot of my things I put out there are more for peers, but a person from the public may look at it just as much. So I try to be really mindful of what I put out, word choices, and I see where people will put out things and they'll have like an image of a baby that may or may not be dead in the image, but it has to do with like postmortem care, or you'll just see these like attention grabbing images. And it's like, I'd rather it be about the actual content than me scaring you with a picture of like a dead baby or something. So I think that there's just a level, and you also don't want to make it about like a spectacle, and you don't want to cheapen your field of what you do. Because if you think about it, you hear terms now that are also being used where we talk about like postmortem surgical technique type things like that. So it's like, we want to be recognized for that technical knowledge and the abilities that we have. We utilize these instruments to create these changes in the body, or we have these skills in communicating with families and coordinating these elaborate events, and you don't want to cheapen that necessarily in exchange for attention. So I feel like you have to be purposeful, but I also feel like you have to be a person, because I put things out on social media, and sometimes I'll put things out that are a little bit more personal, because the idea is that at the end of the day, we're still human beings. We're people, right? So I can create an eyeball out of wax and do all these cool things sometimes. But at the same time, too, I want to be accessible to where if a person had a question or wanted to learn more, they would feel comfortable being vulnerable with me. And I think that
mm,
it's important to it's one thing to say I'm really good at what I do, and you don't want to be like up on Mount Crumpet where you're revered and you're like almost not a regular person, because people aren't going to feel as comfortable talking to you, being honest about, like, again, the ego, right? So, and I'm not perfect and I'm still learning just like everybody else. But I think the idea with social media, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And I think if you really look, you'll see that some people, what they're trying to accomplish is passing knowledge, whether it's with peers. There's some folks that direct, their content more toward the public, which is good too. But I think there's a lot of responsibility though associated. If you're going to put out content, you really need to be mindful that what you're putting out is accurate and that you're able to answer questions that content can provoke. And you have to be
mm,
sensitive. You have to be sensitive to, if I look at that, is it gonna make me more interested in your topic, or am I just looking at it because if it's superficial interest, they're not going to continue to follow you forever. And if they are following you, why are they following you? If it's just to look at, these outrageous images, or if it's just to try to see, a dead person, then why? I mean, is that really a value in your followers? I mean, and I'm not saying not any follower. It's always appreciated that they find your information worthy of their time. That's always a good thing. But what is behind what you're putting out? Like, what is it you're trying to accomplish? How do you want people, when they think of you, what do you want them to think about? Do you want them to think, oh yeah, I remember that person because they posted this picture of like this dead person something something? Because we don't want to objectify our dead. And I think that
right.
when you're utilizing them as props in imagery, that's what happens. And so I try to be very respectful. You won't see anything like that. If you see me putting a head on social media, I promise you it's made of silicone, or it's pretty obvious, you know, because we still want to be, you can't be respected if you don't carry yourself in such a way or present yourself in such a way as being worthy of respect. You know what I mean? You can't have both. So you can't throw out shock value content and then want to be revered necessarily. And if you are revered, is it for the right reasons? Like, you have to be, kind of smarter about things, especially for a field under such scrutiny. You don't want to be insensitive.
Oh,
So that's just my 2 cents on that.
well, I'm going to ask for 2 more cents because there was a for you, I guess for everybody, but I don't think I'll leave it to you in your answer. There was a point where you went from obscure to less obscure in your field. And
Hmm.
then there was a point where you went from I'm not posting anything on social media to I am posting things on social media. And you were just talking about, how you have to be careful. Were you that careful the whole time? How did you learn the hard way? Did you learn the easy way? Are you executing a plan on social media, or are you discovering some of the things that how to be you, how to make it an extension of you, I guess?
So I will admit to you, I was reluctant to even have a TikTok account. Part of that was because when you work for the DoD, you're not allowed to have TikTok on like a government phone
Right.
or open anything, right? So I was already paranoid about TikTok. I'm still not, I mean, I'm Gen X. I'm not completely sold on TikTok, but I get it. I get it. So
Uh-huh.
I went ahead and I realized that if I want to be able to connect with people, and if I want to be able to do this Mary Poppins work, I'm going to have to be a little bit more uncomfortable and a little more active on social media. Like there's no other way to find people and connect with them other than in this day and age, I felt like social media. So I had my own little private page and kind of tinkered around with that. I didn't put much work stuff. And then I was like, okay, I want to have kind of separate things for work. And so I created a separate Facebook page that's just, my business stuff, because not all of the people that follow me as friends are interested in seeing me make like a wax eyeball, like my mom. And
Right.
they're just like, okay, I don't know what, I guess this is interesting. I don't know. And then with Instagram, I had a good talk with my nephew, who's a marketing person. He's like, Aunt Jen, you're going to have to, in order to achieve these goals you have of being able to grow and reach people, you're going to have to do this. So that's when I started doing Instagram, things like that. And then what I do is I pay attention and I see what people are talking about. And I see like I'm in different social media groups. And what that does is it gives you the ability to see kind of what people are either having a challenge with or what they want to know more about, or what's important to them. And so I follow a lot of female specific groups, a lot of funeral director, embalmer specific groups. And then sometimes that gives me ideas for a blog post, or I'll chime in sometime and just be helpful. They may have a topic having to do with, caring for an active duty case. And I'm like, hey, I can help you potentially, just reach out to me, that sort of thing. And so it helped make me more accessible to people and just helped me kind of make myself more visible. And I finally, kind of bit the bullet. And then like I even did one recently where it was kind of personal, but I have some violet streaks in my hair. And I did a little video to talk about that because of the mixed feedback I would get from people after I put the color in my hair. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. And also because I see this with our students, some of them might have tattoos or different things. And, the way people look now versus back in the day is a little different. And so I was like, we're discounting people because we're like looking at them superficially, but we're not digging in a little deeper. And so I made a little video where I talked about how the burden of concealment at the end of the day in a professional setting, it may lie with me. Like I had streaks of violet in my hair, but on the cover of American Funeral Director, you didn't see it because I have them placed in such a way I can hide them. And so that's kind of what I elaborate on, which is a little bit personal, but I was like, let's just talk about this for a minute. So I've gotten a little bit more, I'm not going to say I put some personal things in there, but I feel like it's the best way to connect with people and make yourself available so that if they need help or need you, then they kind of know you exist. Because otherwise, fax machines, not going to work now.
Right.
You can only do so much. So in order to be a resource, you have to be visible. And if you're not visible, then you're not really much of a resource. And so social media is just a way to be that resource, I think.
That's an excellent way to put it. Thank you for putting it that way. I'm going to write that down and repeat it like it's mine and I'm smart.
Great, you can have it. I'll send you an invoice later.
And that's not all I have for you, but we are kind of coming up against it. So I do want to ask, is there something I should have asked and didn't, something you thought you get the opportunity to say, but I didn't provide it?
No, if you're interested in keeping up with me, I have a link tree courtesy of my marketing nephew, because to be honest, I am of the VCR tape generation. So he's helped me come a long way with my technology. But I do have a blog. I have Facebook, Instagram, things of that nature. If you want to just kind of keep up with where I'm at or what I'm doing, or just check out, I have a project I'm going to be working on where I'm going to take a very dark colored trauma head, and I'm going to record myself doing the restoration on it from start to finish in increments. So if you want to follow that along, I'm going to be making that into a cool little video series. And then I'll be in Vegas in February for the Dead Talk, so you guys can find me there. And you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. Like I said, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, all the things. And even if whether it's a question or something I can help you with, I do have my little carpet bag at the ready, so I am here to help.
Very cool. And I will put links in the show notes, but can you tell us all your socials and your website and everything?
Sure. So it's at Mulling Mortician. That's my handle. And that's on TikTok, Instagram. Mulling Mortician is on Facebook. My YouTube channel is at Mulling Mortician. So if you pretty much just type Mulling Mortician, you'll find, and the logo is a thinking Anubis. So if you see the little thinking Anubis, that would be me.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. I say it every week, and every week someone responds, so I'm going to keep saying it. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. Follow along if you're on Apple. If you like the show so much, please tell other people about it. That is the best way to get the word out. podcast listeners like to have podcasts recommended to them, but as a podcast listener, you already know that. I would like to invite you to go to the Kates-Boylston events section and the Kates-Boylston webinar section to see some of the things that we have coming up, because it's been a busy couple weeks and it's going to be a busy couple more. I know many of you are just back from the NFDA event. We have an event coming up Thursday, November 7th. It is 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It's the Cremation Strategies virtual event, and we will have speakers talking about maximizing cremation efficiency and the importance of chain of custody body tracking. And if you've been listening to my In Case You Missed It show on Fridays, you will know that cremation body tracking is it's a perennial issue. It's amazing that people still don't do it, but they still don't, too often to their own detriment, and of course to the detriment of their family. So you can check out that event at katesboylston.com/events. And we have another one on December 10th, the HR and Leadership Forum, and that is December 10th. Again, katesboylston.com for details, link in the show notes. And now for the postmortem. This week, I wanted to let you know that Chris Shelton's latest book, Your Favorite Mortician #3, is out. We profiled Chris in Funeral Service Insider last year, and he was a great interview, and I got a kick out of the 2 books and said that I would let you guys know when the 3rd one came out. So here, this is me letting you know. You can search for Your Favorite Mortician #3 any place that you buy books, but really Amazon. And that will do it this week for Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.